Good afternoon to all of you. This is Dr. Nageshwar Konda, Director, OUCIP, Usman University Campus. I welcome you all for this lecture series. As part of the OUCIP lecture series, today this is the 19th lecture by Dr. Shveta Dhaliwal from Punjab. And at the outset, my sincere gratitude and thankfulness to Dr. Shveta Dhaliwal for her kind acceptance to deliver the valuable ideas, to share the valuable ideas with us. It is an initiation of OUCIP. Every Tuesday, we invite different resource persons from different disciplines to deliver their valuable talks. And today, Dr. Dhaliwal is going to talk on human rights mechanism for South Asia. Yes, it is very important area. Usually across the multi-disciplines, we talk about different foreign policies and also Pacific studies, Indo-Pacific studies, South Asian studies and all. And this particular talk, would try to look at a roadmap for looking at the human rights mechanism. Coming to Dr. Shveta Dhaliwal, ma'am is working at Punjab. She is now coordinator of School of Social Sciences and Interdisciplinary Studies, Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Punjab. Dr. Shveta Dhaliwal works at Department of Political Science, and she is presently working at Rajiv Gandhi University. She has a good number of research papers and research works. She is on the academic panels of several universities and international publication houses like Routledge, Palgrave, Springer, etc. She was invited by African Court of Human Rights and People's Rights, Tanzania. And Dr. Shveta Dhaliwal has availed a number of international scholarships, some of them being International Institute of Human Rights, Strasbourg, France, to attend a course on comparative human rights. And Dr. Shveta Dhaliwal is an important academician who tries to look at the foreign policies and who tries to look at the upcoming events across the discipline. And I came to know through my colleagues of the department, colleagues outside the department, those who are working at Dr. Chalamala Venkateshwarlu, the joint director, and through my friends, I came to know she is one of the leading academicians in the Department of Political Science. Really, we are very happy to invite Dr. Shveta Dhaliwal, today's resource person. The OUCIP welcomes you, ma'am, to deliver the talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Rao, for such kind words. It will be difficult for me to match up to all these things that you've said. And on a very serious note, I should begin by thanking Osmania University Center for International Programs. And this is a very important platform, as any other platform. For academicians nowadays, it's very important to find the right platform to showcase the research that we all are doing in small pockets of our country. So thank you so much. This innovation, this idea is really helping people in knowing what we are doing. If we can take out some good thing from the pandemic, that is the kind of bond we've established across disciplines and over long distances through online platforms. And you were already doing this. I know this. You've been doing this for a long time, and you are an inspiration for people like me. So thank you so much. And with this, I would take your permission to begin with the talk. Right.
Please.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you, all the participants. I hope you find the title itself interesting. I am going to share with you, it's technically not a lecture or a presentation. I'm just trying to share with you my ideas on establishment of a new human rights platform, a human rights mechanism for our own region, that is South Asia. Now, what is interesting in this is that it is not there. And the responsibility to establish this kind of mechanism falls on the shoulders of intellectuals, teachers, researchers like me, you, and people who are the audience right now, and even those who are not listening right now might have a bundle of ideas with them. Whenever we talk about human rights, and that is actually all the time. If we look at the situation in South Asia has become such a potent region to talk about geopolitics and strategies and interventions and concerns of the state versus people, migration, plight of the people, etc., etc. You call it from the point of view of Afghanistan crisis or whatever. This region is a very volatile region. This region has a lot of things going on at the same time. We are such people. Also because we are in such a geographical location that our politics, our regional politics, is bound to be affected by other actors, other factors which are outside the country, of the countries that fall in this region, or outside the region. Again and again, to talk in terms of human rights when it comes to the whole world, and especially when it comes to South Asia. Now, it becomes difficult because it becomes difficult to address the issues of human rights with respect to South Asia, because we are on the point that there is no regional platform where our regional concerns can be even taken up. So this motivated me long back to dedicatedly work on how other regions could do it and why South Asia could not do it. And as we speak, we are already in 2021, and there is no there is no political will, or there is not much, I should not say no, but not much of focus from the academia also to work towards this kind of platform, because human rights platforms have a lot to offer, from socio-political, cultural to economic issues, to issues of conflicts and wars and interventions and etc., etc. So from here, I would focus on the somewhat structured part of my ideas that I'm going to share with you. Now, when we talk about human rights, since this is a platform for international level of research, so when we talk about international mechanism of human rights, the only organization that pops up in our mind automatically is United Nations, and rightly so. Now, international human rights mechanism is definitely dedicated to the path-breaking work done by United Nations, but it is high time that we realize that it does not stop at United Nations. We must understand, this is high time to understand that international human rights system has to be understood in a pyramidal structure. So at the top, yes, United Nations is there, right? So keeping the pyramidal structure in mind, I'll be framing my further arguments, and I'll be submitting my arguments for your rich comments later on. Now, international human rights mechanism by United Nations and United Nations comes up in 1945. The first document that the United Nations creates after the UN Charter, of course, is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That comes in on the date of 10th December 1948. I'm not teaching you. I'm mentioning this date because I will be coming back to this date, considering the point that Universal Declaration of Human Rights was the first document made by the United Nations, and from here, the so-called journey of codification of human rights at international level begins. Now, interesting thing happens at the stage when UDHR is signed. It is unanimously adopted by all the members of the United Nations at that time. Now, I'll come to this point again. Then, United Nations kept its faith in the idea of human rights and peace and equality and attachment of dignity to a human being. So after the adoption of UDHR and after getting a very good response from the countries, of course, they never stopped. So the mechanism of United Nations human rights is a parallel system. It is a two-way system. One, that UN Charter, which is the constitution of the body. Even United Nations Charter, the constitution is also, there is a golden thread of human rights throughout the UN Charter provisions. And for example, the body, which is called nowadays after 2006, we have a new human rights body at the United Nations level that is called Human Rights Council. Human Rights Council is also part of the UN Charter-based mechanism. And then there is another mechanism of United Nations, which is based on treaties of human rights. You all know there is a convention against torture, there is a convention on rights of the child, there is CEDAW for dedicatedly working for women, migrants and their families, and etc. But the story began with the international covenants, two covenants: International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Now, both these covenants were adopted in 1966, right? Because since 48, after the UDHR, United Nations took long time to discuss and to bring together all the contradictions and different views together, and then they came up with two magnificent pieces of human rights documents, that is the two covenants. So they were finalized in 66 and they were put for ratifications. Now, when the treaty system is beginning, for example, why am I emphasizing on treaty? Because now the states are not only to declare, which is in case of the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. The covenants are not merely declarations. The covenants are treaties. Now the party states would be held responsible and would be asked from time to time how much improvement you have done from the last period of assessment. And then you are now obliged to implement and to respect certain human rights that are mentioned in the covenant. So, cutting the story short, it takes 10 years. It takes 10 years to receive the requisite number of ratifications, which was only 35. Only 35 states had to ratify in order to make these two covenants enforceable, right? So this shows the reluctance of the states when it comes to just declaring that we are a very human rights friendly country, and the difference of approach when you are going to be obliged to follow the guidelines and the recommendations and the provisions of the human rights treaties. Anyhow, this is a model of United Nations. This can go on and on. So I'm shutting it down here. Then coming back to the pyramidal structure, then let's come to the second tier of the international system of human rights. rights. And second tier is where I have tried to draw a lot of lessons for the ultimate idea that I'm going to present. In the year 1950, which is not very far away from 48, right, when UDHR comes. In the year 1950, European Convention on Human Rights is adopted by Council of Europe for the European continent, for the European region. Right? We can go into the details, how many countries, etc., but that is not the point here. The point is just the idea. Now, the Regional Human Rights Initiative in Europe was a path-breaking step in itself, because this Convention on Human Rights for Europe precedes the treaties of United Nations on Human Rights by several years, almost 2 decades, or more than 16 years. And it was a regional effort for the first time to make human rights legally binding on the parties who would be signing the convention. Right? Then there is an interesting twist that I want you to take back to. But okay, let me finish one more point, and then I'll go back to the date of 10th December 1948. Not very long after the Europeans, they design and implement the European Convention on Human Rights, comes another regional human rights mechanism. But before that, I want to make one more point, which I'll be using up later. Europe is a very small region as far as territoriality is concerned. However, in order to address different varieties of human rights issues in the region, there is not just one organization that is working for human rights, promotion and protection of human rights in the European region. There are several. In fact, I can name two specifically. One is Council of Europe. I said that they came up with the European Convention on Human Rights, and then there is European Union also. And European Union is also has its own organizational infrastructure, organs dedicated to the working of human rights in the region of Europe. So I'll use this argument a little later again. What is happening in Europe was followed on by the Americas. So in the year 1979, we realized that there is another regional mechanism for human rights protection that came up at the platform of Organization of American States for the American region. Now, I would now take you a little back to the year 1948. America was actually the first region, not the country, the region, Americas, was the first region to have a vision for a declaration of human rights and duties of man. This is the term. I'm repeating the term. American Declaration of Rights and Duties of Man, which was signed even before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And how much was the gap? This declaration, American Declaration, was signed in May 1948, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed in December 1948. The point that I wanted to bring forth here is that whether it was treaty-based understanding that we should have a convention and we should hold the states responsible for it, that also precedes the United Nations, because that job was done first by the Europe, like in 1950, and the covenants came in 1966, right? And even if we look at the declaration idea, that there should be some kind of declaration in order to celebrate the idea of human rights, even that was a regional initiative first before it came to the level of or came at the platform of United Nations. And the example is the American Declaration, which precedes the Universal Declaration of United Nations by a few months. See, I'm not focusing on the debate or the issue that human rights are universal or they are more regional. That is not the debate. I'm just trying to make these arguments, I'm collecting these arguments so that I can build up the case that why it is important to have a South Asian human rights mechanism. I am my whole point was to collect all the arguments as far as possible. I'm deliberately keeping this loose, so I'm sorry if this is disturbing the viewers. And if you don't mind, I can just keep it like this. The point is not to bring up this debate of UN versus regional organizations. Please don't take it like that. I am only taking and collecting. When you're doing research, you pick up arguments, which are going to build up a case for themselves and gel with the whole idea, and rejecting any contribution is not my point, right? So please don't take it otherwise. So having said that, even if it was a treaty-based mechanism or it was a declaration kind of a thing for human rights, both jobs were done very well at the regional platform. In one case, it was the American region, and the other case was European region. And then again, one more point, just to keep the similarity going. Even in American region, the whole job of upholding human rights matters in the America region is not done by just one organization, that is Organization of American States, but it is also done by other organizations which are working for Latin American and Caribbean states, which are working for Central American states, or which organizations which are dedicatedly working for Latin American states only, or for the whole of the Americas, North, Middle, or South, irrespective. I am also going to use this argument later on. So everything all the points that I'm bringing forth are to be connected. This idea is going to be a full circle. And yes, of course. So after America had done it, it was not long after the American arrangement at the level of Organization of American States, the African region in 1981 came up with a very unique document. For example, I don't know whether I mentioned or not, the Convention on Human Rights, the Regional Convention of Human Rights in case of America, which was adopted under the platform of Organization of American States, that is the OAS, is called Inter-American Convention on Human Rights, right? So this is nomenclature in case somebody is interested to read more on this. Then comes Africa. And as Professor Konda has already mentioned, I've had the honor of being at the European institutions and the African institutions myself, and I've been working very closely with the American institutions of human rights, and I could only pay a couple of visits for the Arab system. You can observe, you can feel the difference of approach, the attitude towards the human rights matters when you travel across and you compare. So we'll probably, if time allows, we'll go to that also. Now, Africa, in 1981, Organization of African Union, which is OAU, but then in 2002, it was renamed to be African Union. So I will be sticking to the name African Union. Right? Now, African Union came up with a similar kind of regional arrangement for human rights. But the title itself was very unique. The title was African Charter on Human and People's Rights. It was a unique document for several reasons, beginning from the name itself. And the name is important because of one word, and that word is the word peoples. In the earlier two regional conventions that we were talking about, the European and the Inter-American, there is no such reference to the word peoples. It was very important for Africa, though, to mention the word peoples, because Africa, as we all know, is, it's a bunch of tribes and communities. It is not a land where individual rights are important or everybody wants to talk about, my rights only. No, it is a very complex society. It is a society which is which is being pulled in different directions. You have to be sensitive towards religion, you have to be sensitive towards language, tribes, and all that. I have a few friends who are kings, and when we joke around with them that you are a king, you have such a lucky life you have, and they say that it's very normal to be a king in Africa, because some 50, 100, 200 tribes, which might be composite of 500 to 1,000 people, they together come together and declare you a king. So it's a very fancy word, but it's not that fancy a life. But there is a lot of cultural sensitivity. And jokes apart, but the stature of a king for a tribe, that also is a very reverend kind of relationship. So the point that I'm trying to invoke here is regional human rights mechanisms. From the title that is suggested by the African Convention, which is even not a convention, it is called a charter, African Charter on Human and People's Rights. It is reflective of your own social fabric. Every society cannot be European, every society cannot be American. Every society has its own distinct history and characteristics. Every society has its own path to develop. You understand that? Another unique point of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights was, as I said, that every society has its own course of development. This is the only charter which has declared development as a human right. And very rightly so. All of us, we read that Africa is very rich in resources, yet it is a poor region. Why? Because the development that is needed, that development also needs to be done with respect to the human rights of the people. If not, it is actually going to destroy the rights of the people. It is going to destroy the social structure. It is going to create environmental problems, which would then lead to further human rights crisis. And that is what is happening in Africa. The moment you visit such places, you can observe and feel the difference. Then comes I'm skipping one here. I'll come to that later, because that's not the order that I want to keep it. Then comes another region, and that is the Arab region. One more point. In Africa, again, it is not only the African Union which is taking care of the regional human rights matters. Africa is, as I said, a very complicated society. And it is a very complicated region also. Therefore, and it is huge, as far as the territorial extent is concerned, also as far as the population is concerned, and the categories of population is concerned. So, in this region, in Africa also, ECOWAS is also dedicatedly working for human rights. They have their own, pattern and organizational structure to uphold protect and promote human rights, and then African Union is definitely there. So, and a lot of NGOs are also working. Then comes Arab region. Now, in Arab region also, it is quite recent. It emerged in the years 2000s. 2004, one initiative comes, and then 2008 another initiative comes. So let's say 2008, around 2008, the Arab Human Rights Convention, their own Human Rights Declaration, which is a treaty-based declaration, also comes up. And Arab, of course, we know that Arab is a very volatile and very sensitive region. It is a meeting point of East and West. So the cultural, civilizational clashes are also there. There are political clashes in the region. Resources sometimes can be a problem, and the example is Arab region or the Middle East. Therefore, a lot keeps on happening in Arab region. Again, I would like to repeat one more feature here, that even for Arab region, there are more than one regional organizations which is working for the improvement of human rights at the regional level. One is League of Arab States, and then there is another. I've recently published a paper on what efforts they are doing. That is Organization of Islamic Countries. Right? Now, Arab Regions Initiative brings us to another, lesson, another uniqueness of a kind, and that is that religious sensitivity has also a lot to shape and to be accepted by the people, by the world. It is very important that you project certain religious values in a certain order. I would refrain myself from commenting any further, because I, as far as researcher is concerned, student of human rights is concerned, I would celebrate the effort of the Arab region, that the effort that they have put in to address the issue of human rights, because Arab initiative has been criticized and has been, the mildest of the criticism is that Arab mechanism has a long way to go. They need to, develop a lot of maturity needs to be there, a lot of dedication needs to be there, etc., etc. But that is true for any other regional human rights mechanism. We all have a long way to go. For that matter, South Asia has not even started yet. So that is why it is worthy of celebration and appreciation that Arab region has contributed, and it is a very recent kind of contribution. So we would still, we should keep our eyes glued on what happens in Arab human rights mechanism in case we are interested in the theme itself. Then, now this is the middle body of the pyramidal structure that I was talking about, that the regions are doing something necessarily in association with regional platforms, regional organizations. Now, what is it that we are doing in Asia? Now, Asia is a huge region, and Asia is not only huge, different regions, different subparts of Asia are very distinct in their characteristics, socio-economic, cultural, and whatnot. Right? Now, the point that I was repeating again and again, that there are several regional organizations which are working for Europe. There are several regional organizations working for Americas, for Africa, for Arab. Now is the time to make use of that argument, In Asia, we need a bunch of regional organizations to do the job. If multiple regional organizations are required for a small region like Europe, imagine the urgency of such need in case of Asia. Are you getting the point? So this is how I was planning. I was devising my argument, that I will be using this argument for making a case later. Now, having said that, and I would love your inputs. Why, I'll tell you later. There is always some suspense in my arguments. Now, when it comes to Asia, interestingly, unfortunately, either way you'll take it, there is no such effort for the whole region of Asia to have a human rights mechanism, right? But that's very understandable because that's not possible. We are not only a huge territory, we are the most populous region of the world. Right? And of course, then there is culture, civilizational values, and religion, and language, and whatnot. Race, of course, is a factor. Therefore, when I started looking in Asia, there was still hope. Right? And that hope was, you must have heard the name of Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. Now, ASEAN is one such regional organization which started working for upholding of human rights matters of Southeast Asia at the platform of ASEAN. Now, there is again a unique thing to be, to be taken from the Asian experience. The Southeast Asian Human Rights Mechanism, that was not initiated formally. It was in fact initiated at the level of NGOs, non-governmental organizations. It was an initiative which was not involving the countries. It was actually involving the civil society of Asia. Why is that? Because we know if we understand Asia and we identify a few characteristics of Asia, political will is very difficult in Asia. At best, Asian countries are developing countries. At best. Right? And developing countries also have developing maturity towards issues like human rights. So we have a long way to go. Right? So this is unique as far as the Southeast Asian mechanism is concerned. And this was not done at any other regional platform, neither in Europe, nor in America, nor in Arab, and neither in Africa. So the point that I'm also want to I'm very excited to put in words is every regional mechanism has some peculiarities to it, right? So it is important to address these peculiarities, because in the context of these peculiar, very unique features only, you would be able to propose something. It should appeal the mind of the person who's living in that region, first of all. Only then we can expect that the states should respond. You understand that? So human rights are about everybody. There should not be any artificiality about human rights. You cannot inject human rights, you're bringing it from United Nations and inject it in your own region. That's not going to work. So you need to have a regional articulation for human rights, and which is very desirable. So that's a general argument that I'm basing my work on. Now, Southeast Asia, as I said, brought another unique feature that it did not start with involvement of the states. It actually came much later. Now we have Asian Declaration of Human Rights, and we also have organs that are dedicatedly working for human rights of the region. Now, one thing was, I was very happy to realize that there is one basis which I could use in order to share my ideas on South Asia, and that was that the presence of a sub-regional human rights mechanism in Asia made it a convenient argument for me that there can be a South Asian human rights mechanism as well. I hope you're getting my point, because there was already a precedence. Already an effort had been made. So all I wanted to do was use that already existing argument, and to use that argument, we call it induction deduction method of research. So I was very relieved to study the Southeast Asian model now, but that's not the job done, Now, when I used all these arguments and wanted to propose something for South Asia, I realized that I have only come halfway, and the halfway of the journey, is still left. Let's begin the half journey which is left, right? Now, South Asia is, as I said, is a very strategically placed region, sub-region. We are, territorially connecting landmass. We are a landmass wherein there is one country which is very huge in size, and every other country is very small in size. So that becomes a problem for South Asia, because a huge country which shares boundary, there are hardly any countries which are sharing boundaries with each other in South Asia, but there are almost all the countries which are sharing boundaries with India, except for, Sri Lanka, but then we have a strait in between, and we'll come to these arguments later again. So when I explored how South Asia can be planned in order to propose such a thing, so all these arguments, they bombarded my mind. How are you going to work out all these things? So the first thing that needs to be identified is there any regional organization working for the region? One, or it is better to have more than one? So definitely you must have read about South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, that is called SARC. Now this book that I published on the whole idea that I'm presenting today, this book was focused on how a South Asian mechanism can be worked out on the platform of SARC. But since I got a good response to the book, it's all sold out in the first edition. I'm about to submit my second edition of the book, wherein I'm going to explore more regional organizations, because unfortunately, or interestingly, either way you take it, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, that is SARC, has been reduced to a redundant organization. Right? And not only that, we are adding insult to injury from SARC's point of view. We have created so many other regional platforms. Right? We have BIMSTEC, we have BRICS, we also have. Do I need to check the chat also? Okay. Thank you, Sam. Right. So I was saying that there were challenges, definitely. And the biggest challenge that I realized, and I'm continuing my research on the topic, and I'll be submitting the second edition in early next year or end of this year, wherein I have to include other regional organizations which are working on the region or for the region, BIMSTEC and IORARC, because maritime has also become very important to discuss, And we need to explore what these regional organizations, where do they stand when it comes to human rights. So either ways, it's going to be an interesting work. Another aspect which needs to be taken into account when we talk about South Asian human rights mechanism is the origin of SARC. Right? SARC is originating in 1985. Right? It is quite recent, origin as far as the second generation or second wave of international organizations is concerned. Right? I would urge all of you to please understand or read a little bit if this is confusing for you. In international organizations studies, there are two waves of international organizations. Right? One is the nature of international organizations which came up in the West, right? Like the European organizations or the American organizations. And the second wave of regional international organizations, which were regional in scope, came up in the second wave, wherein most of the African and Asian organizations emerged. SARC is one of those organizations which emerged in the second movement, second wave of organizations at the world level. So SARC, because has emerged out of a very peculiar background, the political background of the region. All the countries have had a colonial background or colonial control, and the countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, which were actually one, were carved out of each other. So these kind of backgrounds I'm talking about. In the background of this kind of political history, organizations like South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, they have a very unique characteristic. That unique characteristic, number one, is they refrain from, or SARC particularly, refrains from bilateral matters. Right? It was deliberately kept like that because there were a lot of bilateral matters in South Asia. Imagine the times of 1985, when the whole idea was, mooted and the organization was created. Now, second peculiar feature is that because the sense of sovereignty, sense of independence is very strong in South Asian countries, therefore, the organizations like SARC, they want to show that they respect the sovereign autonomy of the member states like anything. Therefore, the decision-making practices at the level of regional organization like SARC are based on consensus. Let's say we are attending this lecture today. It will be difficult to attain a consensus even in this group of people. And we are not countries even. We are just individuals. That becomes, and a couple of other features, that becomes, all these features, they become a problem for SARC. That is why SARC, could not reach to its potential. However, I tried my best to equate, to establish the capabilities of SARC with the capabilities of European and African and American counterparts, because if at all a regional organization or a regional human rights mechanism is to be designed, it has to be designed at some platform. And the most potential platform could be for South Asia could be SARC. Of course, there are other organizations. For example, we can also follow the model of Southeast Asia, where we can do it at the level of NGOs and civil society. That has already been done. That is being done. However, South Asia is it will be very important for South Asia to simultaneously, or at least make an effort to make this regional human rights mechanism a reality at the platform of SARC. I'll quickly use some of the similarities, the kind of building of argument that I have done, and I'm reading just few lines from the book. For example, the Statute of the Council of Europe, it provides for a body called the Committee of Ministers in its Chapter 4, Articles 13 to 21. That let's not go into detail. And this is the most powerful decision-making organ of the Council of Europe. The structure of this committee can be compared with the SARC's Council of Ministers provided for in Article 4 of the SARC Charter. Now, this is how I based my arguments in the primary documents, because there was not much scholarship on the topic. South Asian states are not interested in having a human rights mechanism, because they fear that a human rights platform would be used against each other to attack each other's sovereignty, to attack each other's peace, law and order situation, etc., etc. Because at the level of SARC or in South Asia, the trust deficit in the member countries, I realize that that becomes a great roadblock in paving the way. The structure of this committee can be compared with SARC's Council of Ministers provided for so and so in the Charter. The two organs of the Council of Europe and SARC are both decision-making organs. Both the bodies are constituted of foreign ministers of member states, as per the articles, etc., etc. I tried my best to work out the charter, the constitution of SARC, and to bring the argument from within the charter, so that it should not appear as if it is my own fanciful idea that I want to do this and let's just say it. No. There are certain, what you call a ray of hope within the SARC charter. If we try to work on the SARC charter itself, there are provisions which are similar to the organizations which have already established a very successful, thriving, promising human rights mechanism. I'll share a small example. For example, the European human rights mechanism is so popular amongst the people that sometimes people write to the European Court of Human Rights. And the court is, all these associations, all these organs are there in the Strasbourg, where I visited, and it's a very small building, very insignificant. Design is very nice, but then it's a very peaceful place. People write to the court that I have, it is my human right to be loved by my wife, and my wife doesn't love me enough. So I want the Human Rights Court to kindly, address this problem. And it is not a joke. This was shared by one of the committee members who, he's a professor emeritus, Professor Eckhart Klein. It shows the faith, the trust of the people, that as if the human rights mechanism of Europe can solve all your problems. The trust does matter. Human rights discourse is all about trust, having faith in each other's goodwill and to offer goodwill all the time. Then I made another comparison, another similarity, which is from a very non-European and very contrasting region, and that is Africa. And I'm reading from the book that I wrote. I've written that originally the Organization of African States, known as the Organization of African Union, had no agenda for human rights in its charter. The organization focused on conflict resolution among the states of the region that had a lot of issues related to sovereignty and territorial integrity, despite the fact that African Union had no direct inclination to foster human rights in the region. It did mention human rights documents like UDHR. Now, what is the argument that I've written and developed from here on in the book? SARC Charter does not refer to the word human rights, period. When I was writing this book, I wrote down to one of the bodies of South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, and I wrote an email that I'm doing so and so work, and I would like to come and interview and consult your library, and etc. etc. I got one sentence of reply: SARC does not work on human rights, full stop. Right? Then there was another organization I wrote to that I would like to consult your library for so and so work. And I got a very long email rejecting the whole idea that why at all you want to do the work on this, because no work has been done. How will you get the literature? But I was very happy. What does a researcher want? Only this, that whatever you are thinking is new. It should not be blindly new. It should not be new without reality. So I became very serious after these responses. Then I got down to the original documents, and I started to quote from the original documents of SARC and comparing it with the other original documents of other regions. Interestingly, the book got very good response because somebody was making a point this book is a interdisciplinary work. Of course, you cannot talk about, unfortunately or interestingly, either way you want to take it. When you talk about pure politics, people are less interested. When you talk about pure law, people are even less interested. When you talk only about culture, everybody is not interested. The works like this, they involve cultural sensibilities, religious sensibilities, legal knowledge, legal background, historical background of the society. Otherwise, these kind of proposals, they do not have any appeal whatsoever, right? And okay, very few, moments are left. So having said all this, then there was, after this, I dedicated the whole idea of how step by step we can imagine to be working for an independent South Asian human rights mechanism. And I was not overexcited like a child. I have proposed it into phases. I understand. After all these studies and after all the responses and people that I interviewed, professors like YSR Murthy, who's now a vice chancellor in University, RV University, Karnataka. He was at that time director research in National Human Rights Institute, National Human Rights Commission, and Professor Gurjeet Singh, may he rest in peace, he's no more. The vision that these people gave me, and my colleagues, of course. I proposed the possibility of South Asian human rights mechanism into phases because I realized, I have to be very true. I should sound true. I should sound doable. Now, I have kept, for example, every other regional organization is proposing, has established a regional human rights code. Now, in a region like South Asia, where talking about a regional mechanism is, rejected, it would be a futile effort to mention, let us have a human rights code for whole of South Asia. People will throw stones at me. You've gone mad or what? So I have kept it in the last phase because I know There are other phases. We have to develop our thought process in phases. I have involved and I have given due importance to the civil society members, members of the academia, students, research, which is dedicated on the topic of this. There is a researcher who's doing a PhD work with me. She's talking. She's for example proposing a work that how the interstate river water disputes in South Asia should have human rights perspective. Oh, it was not liked by experts in the field. So it takes time. You need to take time, and I'm so thankful to Professor Nageshwar Rao here for giving me a platform like this. I'm a very I have a huge appetite for learning more and knowing more from people, learned people like you, and using platforms like yours. And thank you so much. I'll put an end to my presentation here, and I would definitely be taking away your responses, and I would be using those responses in the second edition of the book, which I'm sure, with all of your wishes, would also do equally good. Once again, I cannot thank enough Dr. Venkatesh Varlu, Professor Konda Nageshwar Rao, and the whole platform of Osmania University. This university has been wonderful as a team for me. And over to you, Professor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, madam. We have enjoyed your session. Dr. Shveta Dhaliwal was talking about different aspects of human rights mechanism, especially for South Asia. As per her title, it is like a roadmap, and she was talking about how South Asia is an important region for several things, ranging from its basic resources to the strategic points. The context of Afghanistan and the present lecture has reached its expectations, and Dr. Dhaliwal has spoken different things dealing with bringing the region, that is South Asia, in the academia or academic limelight to project its potentialities and to establish a sub-regional like human rights mechanism. And as she said, and in the present context, the lecture has reached in reaching the expectations, in exploring the potentialities and positive inputs of the SARC countries in this respect. And thank you very much, Dr. Shveta Dhaliwal, madam, on behalf of the OUCIP.